The smell of old leather and cigarettes from the Estrella van still haunts me every time I pass a Volkswagen dealership. 18 years of keeping a secret might seem like a long time, but destroying a friendship in a single night can take just seconds. My name is Hunter. I'm 28, and this is the story of how I made the biggest mistake of my life by sleeping with my straight best friend in a van in the middle of the American desert. I work as a freelance developer, a job that allows me to travel and work from anywhere with decent Wi-Fi. 3 months ago, I moved from Seattle to Los Angeles, officially to look for new projects and better opportunities. I didn't tell anyone the real reason. I needed to run away from myself, from my feelings, from a whole life built on lies that I told to the most important person in my existence. Blake Morrison has always been my complementary opposite. Where I am introspective and calculating, he is spontaneous and charismatic. A commercial photographer and personal trainer, he has that kind of natural magnetism that makes waitresses flirt shamelessly, while he doesn't even notice. At 29, Blake has a collection of relationship stories that I've been listening to, with feigned interest and genuine pain for over a decade. The cruel irony of my situation is that I became the best friend anyone could wish for, precisely because I was desperate to be more than that. I perfected the art of emotional containment with surgical precision. Every joke at the right time, every piece of advice about his girlfriends, every hug that lasted exactly 3 seconds so it wouldn't seem weird. All calculated to keep me close without arousing suspicion. For years, I believed I had built the perfect disguise. I feigned interest in women during conversations, invented occasional dates, and maintained a convincing performance of heterosexuality that emotionally exhausted me. Blake never questioned it, never suspected a thing. To him, I was just Hunter, the reliable friend who was always available, who always understood him, who never judged him. What you're hearing here is just the beginning. The full stories, unfiltered, and with all the details you can imagine, are available now. Check out the link in the description right now. If you've ever been through the experience of loving someone in silence whom you consider impossible, leave your like and subscribe to the channel, because this story will show you how far that feeling can take us. The move to Los Angeles had given me a few months of breathing room. Physical distance from Blake meant fewer temptations, fewer moments where I had to pretend to be normal while my heart raced. I was starting to believe I might be able to get over this unhealthy obsession when I received the call that would change everything. Hunter, man, I need you. Blake's voice sounded different on the phone, laden with a vulnerability he rarely showed. Sarah broke up with me. She said I'm emotionally unavailable, that I never truly give myself in relationships. I bought a vintage van, and I'm going on a road trip through the Southwest. Come with me, please. I need my best friend right now. Sarah had been Blake's most serious girlfriend, a 4-year relationship that I had followed with the masochistic dedication of someone rooting against their own team. When he told me they were moving in together, I spent a whole week pretending to have the flu so I wouldn't have to listen to him talk about wedding plans. Now she had broken up with him, and Blake was asking me to comfort him on a trip that would put us together, alone, for weeks. Of course, Blake. When do you want to leave? My answer came out automatically, conditioned by years of always saying yes to any of his requests. It was only after hanging up that I realized what I had just agreed to. Weeks cooped up in a small space with the person I had been secretly obsessed with for 18 years. Estrella was a 1978 Volkswagen van painted in faded blue with white details. Blake had bought it from a retired surfer in Santa Barbara, complete with a refurbished interior of light wood and colorful fabrics reminiscent of the 70s. It had a convertible double bed in the back, a small stove, a compact fridge, and a tiny chemical toilet. It was simultaneously any adventurer's dream vehicle and my future emotional prison on wheels. What do you think? Blake asked with genuine enthusiasm when he first showed me the van. His hands ran over the wooden surfaces with paternal pride. I thought we could do that route we always talked about. Mojave Desert, Grand Canyon, maybe go down to New Mexico. A few weeks on the road, just the two of us. Like the old days. The old days he was referring to were the trips we took during school vacations, when sleeping in the same hotel room was natural and I would spend whole nights awake, hypnotized by the sound of his breathing just a few feet away. Now we would be even closer, with no walls separating our bodies, with no luxury of personal space. It's perfect, I lied, forcing enthusiasm into my voice. When do we leave? The routine of the road quickly settled in during the first few days. I always woke up first, a consequence of years of sleeping poorly due to obsessive thoughts about Blake. I used those precious moments to watch him sleep, allowing myself a few seconds of honesty before rebuilding my emotional barriers to face another day of pretending. Blake would wake up with that natural smile that had been making my stomach do flips since high school. He would stretch his arms over his head, muscles contracting under his sleep-rumpled t-shirt, completely oblivious to the effect he had on me. "Morning, brother," he'd always say, and I'd die a little inside every time I heard the word brother come out of the lips I had fantasized about for almost 2 decades. Our days followed a predictable rhythm. A simple breakfast cooked on the van's stove, planning the day's route on the road maps that Blake insisted on using instead of GPS, and stopping in small towns that seemed frozen in time. He photographed everything with professional passion: landscapes, old buildings, local people who let themselves be portrayed by his natural charisma. "You should pose for a few photos," Blake suggested one afternoon, while we were stopped at a viewpoint in the Mojave Desert. "The light is perfect, and you have an interesting face for portraits." Interesting face. That's how he saw me, as an interesting face to photograph, not as someone who could love him the way he deserved. Even so, I posed for his photos because it was an excuse for him to look at me through the lens, to pay attention to every detail of my face, even if it was just for artistic reasons. The confined space of the van amplified every sensation. When we prepared meals together in the tiny kitchen, our bodies inevitably brushed against each other. Blake, naturally tactile as he always was, would put his hand on my shoulder to reach for something in the high cabinet, touch my arm during animated conversations, automatic gestures that for him meant nothing but familiarity, but that went through me like electric shocks. The nights were my greatest torture. The convertible bed was technically big enough for 2 adults, but Blake insisted we buy individual sleeping bags so we wouldn't bother each other during sleep. A cruel lie of fate. We spent the day stuck together out of necessity due to the limited space. But at bedtime, he made sure to keep a physical distance. I would lie awake listening to his breathing gradually deepen, counting the hours until I could relax enough to sleep without the risk of talking in my dreams. How many times did I almost whisper his name in the dark? How many times did my hand involuntarily move in his direction before my conscience pulled it back? Blake began to open up about the breakup with Sarah as the days passed. "She said I never completely give myself," he confessed one night while we watched the stars lying on the van's roof. "That I always keep a part of myself locked away, inaccessible. I didn't understand it at the time, but maybe she was right." I wanted to scream that I knew every part of him, that I had studied his gestures and expressions like an obsessive academic, that I could love him with an intensity that would make Sarah look like a casual admirer. Instead, I offered the safe and generic advice. "Relationships are complicated, man. Sometimes people just don't fit together. But that's what bothers me," he continued, turning to face me. 18 years of friendship with you, and I've never felt that lack of connection she talked about. With you it's easy. It's natural. Maybe the problem is that I'm looking for something in women that I only find in our friendship." His words were simultaneously everything I had ever wanted to hear, and my greatest torture. Blake was essentially saying that I knew him better than any woman he had ever been with, but he interpreted this as proof of the quality of our friendship, not as a clue that maybe there was something deeper between us. The internal conflict grew every day. When Blake laughed at my jokes with that genuine laugh that made his eyes crinkle, when he asked for my opinion on important matters, when he showed the absolute trust he placed in me, I felt simultaneously the luckiest and most miserable man in the world. The situation came to a head during our stop in Sedona, Arizona. Blake had chosen to camp in an isolated spot among the red rock formations, far from other tourists. "I need some quiet to process everything that's going on in my head," he explained as he parked the van. That night, he brought out a bottle of tequila he had bought in one of the towns we passed through. "Sarah always complained that I drink too much when I'm stressed," he said, unscrewing the cap. Maybe she was right about that too, but today, I don't care. We drank more than we should have while contemplating the impossible starry sky of the desert. Blake began to question everything about his life. His professional choices, his past relationships, his inability to connect emotionally with people. "Sometimes I feel like I'm living on autopilot," he confessed. "Like I'm an actor playing the role of Blake Morrison, but I've forgotten who I really am under the performance." His words echoed my own experience in a scary way. I was also living a role, that of the straight best friend who supported Blake unconditionally. The difference was that my performance had lasted 18 years and was slowly killing me inside. "You're the only person I can be completely myself with," Blake continued, his voice intoxicated, but his eyes focused on mine. 18 years, and you've never abandoned me, never judged me, never lied to me." The irony of his words cut me like a sharp blade. I was lying to him at that very moment. had lied every day for the past 18 years. My whole life was a lie built around the fear of losing his friendship if he found out the truth about my feelings. The weight of the hypocrisy, combined with the alcohol running through my veins and the physical proximity of Blake, began to crack the containment walls I had so carefully built over the years. I felt something dangerous stirring in my chest, a desperate honesty wanting to explode outwards. Blake noticed the change in my expression. "What's wrong, Hunter?" he asked, moving closer. "You have a strange look. Different." It was now. After 18 years of pretending, I was seconds away from destroying everything or finally being free. The alcohol had lowered my defenses, Blake's vulnerability had opened a breach in his, and for the first time since I'd known him, I felt that maybe there was a microscopic possibility that he could reciprocate my feelings. Or maybe I was about to make the biggest mistake of my life. I began, but the words died in my throat. Blake was so close I could feel the heat emanating from his body, the familiar smell of his cologne mixed with sweat and tequila. His eyes, normally carefree, held an intensity I had never seen before. "Say it, man," he insisted, his voice hoarse. "There's something you're not telling me, isn't there? I've known you for too long not to notice when you're holding something back." My heart was beating so hard I was sure he could hear it. 18 years of secrets pressed against my chest like a caged animal wanting to escape. The alcohol had dissolved my usual ability to control my emotions, and for one terrifying moment, I considered telling him everything. "Blake, I tried again, but he interrupted me by doing something completely unexpected. He put his hand on my face. It wasn't a casual touch like the 1,000 others we had exchanged over the years. His fingers traced my jaw with a softness that made my world stop spinning. "You've been amazing with me these last few days," he whispered. "I don't know how I would have handled all this confusion without you here." The desert temperature had plummeted with the sunset, but my whole body was on fire. Blake had never touched me like that, had never looked at me with that expression that seemed to carry desire? Impossible. It must have been a projection of my desperate mind interpreting signs that didn't exist. "Sarah was right about one thing," he continued, his thumb now making circular motions on my cheek. "I really don't give myself completely to people, but with you it's different. It always has been." My breathing became ragged. Every fiber of my being screamed at me to pull away, to keep the safety of our friendship intact, but I was paralyzed by the intensity of the moment. Blake leaned in even closer, and I realized he was trembling too. "Sometimes I wonder," he murmured, so low I had to focus to hear. "I wonder what it would be like if we... He didn't finish the sentence, but his eyes fixed on my lips for a fraction of a second that felt like an eternity. That's when I understood I wasn't imagining things. Blake was thinking exactly what I was thinking, wanting exactly what I was wanting. The first kiss happened as if the universe had been holding its breath for 18 years and could finally exhale. Gentle at first, almost hesitant, as if we were both testing unknown waters. Blake tasted of tequila and possibilities, of all the fantasies I had kept secret and never imagined could become real. When we broke apart for a second, his eyes were wide with surprise, as if he couldn't believe what he had just done. "Hunter, he began, but this time it was I who interrupted him, pulling him back for another kiss. This one was different, more urgent, more desperate. 18 years of containment broke like a dam giving way to pressure. My hands found his hair, his arms wrapped around me with a force that suggested he was just as afraid of losing me as I was of waking up from this impossible dream. "Let's go inside the van," Blake murmured against my lips, and I could only nod, unable to form coherent words. The interior of the Estrella never seemed so small as in that moment. Blake quickly converted the living area into the bed, our hands constantly touching during the process, as if we needed the physical confirmation that this was really happening. The soft light of the LED lamps created an intimate atmosphere that made my head spin even more. When Blake turned to face me again, I saw my own desperation reflected in his eyes. He approached slowly, giving me time to back away if I wanted. But backing away was the last thing in the universe I would do at that moment. "I've never done this before," he confessed, his voice laden with vulnerability. "With a man, I mean. But with you, it feels right somehow." His words were like a punch to the stomach and a warm hug at the same time. Blake was giving himself to me in the same way I had dreamed of for so long, but he was also trusting me to guide him through unknown territory. "You don't have to do anything you don't want to," I whispered, struggling to maintain some control over the situation. "We can stop at any time. He smiled, that crooked smile I knew so well, but which now held a completely new meaning. "I don't want to stop," he said, and pulled me in for another kiss that made any rational thought evaporate from my mind. What followed was a slow and intense exploration of forbidden territory that I had only mapped out in fantasies. Blake's hands roamed my body with genuine curiosity, each touch a discovery that made him breathe deeper. When it was my turn to reciprocate, I realized I was trembling with nervousness and accumulated desire. Blake was everything I had imagined, and much more. His skin was warm and smooth under my fingers, muscles involuntarily contracting when I found sensitive spots. Every muffled groan that escaped his lips was like music to my ears, confirmation that I was managing to make him feel a fraction of the pleasure that his mere existence had given me for years. When we finally came together completely, I felt as if my soul was being recognized after decades of exile. Blake whispered my name like a prayer, his eyes never leaving mine, as if he too was trying to memorize every second of that moment that seemed impossible. The movement between us became an ancient ritual performed for the first time, each rhythm a silent conversation about desires we had never dared to express in words. Blake responded to my touch with an intensity that suggested that maybe his feelings were deeper than I had ever imagined. When the climax came, it was devastating in its intensity. Blake arched against me, my name coming from his lips like a muffled cry, and I felt my world fragment and rebuild in a matter of seconds. I had never experienced something so physically overwhelming and emotionally revolutionary at the same time. We lay in silence for long minutes afterward, our breaths gradually returning to normal, the sweat cooling on our skin. Blake drew lazy circles on my chest with his fingers, a gesture so intimate it made my heart race again. "That was," he began, but the sentence died in the air, laden with a weight that we both felt but couldn't name. "Incredible," I completed, because it was the only word I could form with the fragments of my brain that were still working. Blake smiled, but I noticed something changing in his expression. Reality was starting to seep into the magical bubble we had created. He moved away slightly, and even that small physical distance was like a cut. "Hunter, he began again, and this time the tone held a hesitation that made my stomach drop. "I don't know what this means. For us, I mean." And there it was, the ticking time bomb I knew would eventually explode. Blake wasn't gay. This had been a moment of vulnerability, alcohol, and emotional confusion. Now that the fog of desire was dissipating, he was beginning to process what had happened, and I could see the panic growing in his eyes. "It doesn't have to mean anything," I lied, trying to protect us both from the inevitable fall. "We're going through a tough time. We drank too much." "No," he interrupted me, sitting up abruptly in bed. "It wasn't just the alcohol, and you know it. I feel something for you that I've never felt for any other man. But I also don't know what to do with it." His words were simultaneously everything I wanted to hear, and my biggest nightmare. Blake was admitting that there were genuine feelings involved, but he was also clearly terrified by this discovery about himself. The next 2 days were a carefully disguised hell of normality. Blake alternated between moments of genuine affection, a touch on my hand, a smile that lasted a second longer than normal, and periods of strange formality where he treated me like a distant acquaintance. I, in turn, was living my own kind of torture. I had tasted paradise, and now I was being forced to pretend it meant nothing. Every attempt to talk about what had happened was skillfully deflected by Blake or aborted by my own cowardice. During breakfast on the second day, Blake casually announced that he had called Sarah the night before. "We talked for 2 hours, he said, avoiding my gaze. "She said maybe we should try again when I get back to Los Angeles." The words were like a punch to the stomach. Blake was running back to the comfort zone of heterosexuality, using Sarah as a shield against the confusing feelings our encounter had awakened in him. "That's great," I managed to say, my voice sounding strange even to my own ears. "You guys have history together." The tension finally exploded during a gas stop in a tiny town in New Mexico. Blake had gone to buy snacks while I filled the tank, and when he came back, he found me leaning against the van, clearly disturbed. "We need to talk," he said, his voice filled with a determination that I recognized from moments when he made difficult decisions. "About what?" I asked, even though I knew exactly what he wanted to talk about. "About what happened. About us. About the fact that I can't stop thinking about that night and it's driving me crazy." My heart raced again, but this time with terror instead of hope. Blake was about to verbalize what we both knew, that that night had changed everything between us, and not necessarily for the better. The silence that followed was deafening. Blake stared at me with an expression I had never seen before, a devastating mix of confusion, fear, and something that looked a lot like betrayal. The hot desert wind blew between us, carrying the smell of gasoline and burnt asphalt that I will now forever associate with the moment my life fell apart. 18 years, Hunter, he said finally, his voice low but filled with an intensity that made me instinctively recoil. 18 years you felt this way about me and you never said anything. It wasn't a question. It was a statement loaded with multiple layers of emotion that I couldn't fully decipher. There was pain there, for sure. Anger, too. But underneath all that, I noticed something that gave me a glimmer of hope. Curiosity. I couldn't, I replied, my voice coming out hoarser than I intended. You're straight, Blake. You have girlfriends, you talk about getting married, having kids. How could I ruin our friendship with something I knew was impossible? Impossible? He gave a bitter laugh. Man, you saw what happened in that van. You felt how I responded to you. How can you call that impossible? His words hit me like a slap in the face. Blake was right. He had responded. He had given himself completely in that moment. But that only made everything more confusing and painful. So what do you want from me? I asked, desperate. Do you want me to apologize for falling in love with you? Do you want me to pretend that night didn't happen? Or do you want me to accept that you might have feelings for a man and still run back to Sarah? The mention of his ex-girlfriend was like lighting a fuse. Blake took a step toward me, his fists clenched. Don't bring her into this. Sarah has nothing to do with what's happening between us. It has everything to do with it, I exploded. 18 years of frustration finally finding an outlet. You ran to her the second you woke up in my bed. You called her as if that night with me had been a nightmare you needed to wake up from. Because I'm scared, he yelled back, and the desperation in his voice instantly silenced me. I'm scared of what that night means, of what I felt, of what I'm still feeling. I'm 29 years old, Hunter. 29 years of believing I knew my sexuality perfectly, and then you show up and mess everything up. Tears began to form in his eyes, and seeing Blake Morrison, the most self-assured man I knew, on the verge of crying because of me, was devastating in a way I never imagined. You think it's easy for me? He continued, his voice breaking. Finding out at 29 that maybe I'm bisexual? That maybe I've wasted years forcing myself to feel things that weren't natural for me? Do you think it's simple to look back and realize that maybe the reason I could never emotionally connect with any woman is because a part of me always knew I was in love with my best friend? The world stopped. Blake had just said he was in love with me. What did you just say? I whispered, not trusting that I had heard correctly. He ran his hands through his hair, a gesture of frustration I knew so well. You heard right. I'm in love with you. Probably have been for years without realizing it. And I'm terrified because that changes everything about who I thought I was. For a moment, I felt an euphoria that made me dizzy. Blake loved me. After 18 years of one-sided love, he was finally admitting that he felt the same. But the joy lasted only seconds before being replaced by an even deeper pain. And yet you're going back to her, I stated. Even knowing this, you're going to choose the lie because it's easier than facing the truth. It's not about being easy, he responded, desperate. It's about not destroying my entire life because of a discovery that came too late. Too late for what? You're 29, not 90. You can build a new life. You can be truly happy instead of pretending to be happy with someone who will never know you the way I do. And you? Blake interrupted me, pointing his finger at me. What are you going to do? Continue living in the shadows, waiting for crumbs of affection? Are you going to pretend everything's okay when I marry her and have kids, and you're still just the best friend who never got what he really wanted? His words were cruel but accurate. He was forcing me to face a truth that I myself hadn't fully processed. Even if Blake recognized his feelings, that didn't mean he would have the courage to act on them. I'd rather have you as a friend than not have you at all, I replied. And even as I spoke, I realized how pathetic that sentence sounded. That's a lie and you know it, Blake said, gentler now. You can't be just my friend anymore, Hunter. Not after that night. And I can't pretend I don't feel anything for you anymore. We stared at each other for long minutes, the weight of 18 years of history and one night of passion creating an almost physical tension between us. I could see the internal struggle happening in Blake's eyes, the conflict between what he felt and what he thought he should feel. So what do we do? I asked finally. Blake closed his eyes and took a deep breath. When he opened them again, I saw that he had made a decision. I don't know, he admitted, but I know I can't pretend anymore. I canceled my plans with Sarah this morning. My heart stopped. You canceled? I told her it wouldn't be fair to either of us for me to go back to a relationship when my feelings are somewhere else. He took a step closer, hesitant. My feelings are with you, Hunter. I don't know what this means for the future. I don't know how to navigate this, but I know I want to find out. The tears I had been holding back for days finally escaped. Blake moved closer and, hesitantly, raised his hand to wipe one that was running down my cheek. I'm scared, he confessed. Scared of not knowing how to be a man's boyfriend. Scared of my family's reaction. Scared of ruining our friendship if this doesn't work out. But I'm more scared of spending the rest of my life wondering, what if? I'm scared too, I admitted. Scared of not being enough for you. That this is just a phase. That you'll wake up one day and realize you made a mistake. Blake smiled, that crooked smile I loved so much, but now directed at me in a completely new way. Then let's be scared together, he said, and kissed me right there, in the parking lot of that gas station lost in the middle of nowhere. This kiss was different from the ones we had exchanged in the van. There was no alcohol, no desperation or urgency. It was a kiss of conscious choice, of two men who decided to face their fears together instead of separately. When we broke apart, Blake rested his forehead on mine. Our friendship died in that van, he said softly. You can't go back to being just friends after everything that happened. My heart tightened, but he continued before I could misinterpret his words. But maybe we can build something new, something more honest, more real. It's going to be scary, and we'll probably make mistakes, but at least it will be real. 3 months have passed since that day at the gas station. Blake officially moved to Los Angeles last week, not to be closer to his photography jobs, as he told his family, but to be closer to me. We share a small apartment in Santa Monica, a decision we made after 2 weeks of long conversations about expectations, fears, and possibilities. I won't lie, it hasn't been easy. Blake still struggles with identity issues, especially when we go out in public together. I still struggle with years of insecurity and fear of abandonment that don't disappear overnight. We have arguments, moments of doubt, days when one or both of us question if we made the right choice. But we also have mornings when I wake up and Blake is already awake, watching me with that look that I now recognize as love. We have late-night conversations about our dreams and fears, without masks, without pretense. We have moments of intimacy that surpass all the fantasies I nourished for 18 years. Blake still hasn't publicly come out as bisexual. He's told a few close friends about us, but he hasn't had the courage to tell his family yet. I respect his time because I know this journey of self-discovery can't be forced. I've learned to express my feelings out loud instead of keeping them as painful secrets. It's still hard sometimes, after a lifetime of containment, but Blake is patient when the words come out jumbled, or when I need time to process emotions. I'm not used to feeling freely. Our old friendship really did die in that van in the middle of the desert. But what was born from its ashes is much more valuable. A relationship built on truth, mutual vulnerability, and the kind of love that is only possible when two people decide to be completely honest with each other. Yesterday, Blake asked me if I regretted keeping my feelings for 18 years. I thought about the question for a long time before answering. Yes, I regret all the years lost pretending to be just a friend. But I also know that maybe we needed to go down that long and painful path to get to where we are now. Two people mature enough to choose love over fear. The Estrella van is still in the garage of our building. Blake talks about selling it, says it carries too many complicated memories. I told him to keep it, not because I want to remember the pain of those days, but because it represents the moment we stopped lying to each other and started building something real. If you are living an impossible love right now, if you are holding back feelings that seem too big to fit inside your chest, leave it in the comments. Would you have the courage to risk everything for the truth? The journey isn't easy, and I can't guarantee a happy ending. But I can guarantee that living in honesty, even when it hurts, is better than living in a lie, even when it's comfortable. What you're hearing here is just the beginning. The full stories, unfiltered and with all the details you can imagine, are available now. Check out the link in the description right now. Like this video if the story touched you in some way, and subscribe to the channel for more stories about courage, love, and the decisions that change our lives forever. Because sometimes the biggest mistake we can make is not risking anything when everything we want is within our reach, just waiting for us to be brave enough to reach out and take it.